Welcome to Skywalker Tales, your nightly escape to a galaxy far, far away. Before we begin tonight's story, drop a comment with your planet and time zone. I love seeing where across the galaxy our listeners are tuning in from. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's journey through the stars.
In a time long before the rise of the Empire in the outer rim of the galaxy, a child was born beneath the twin suns of Harun Kal, a wild and untamed jungle world cloaked in mystery. His name was Mace Windu. From the moment of his birth, the Force stirred around him. Orphaned as an infant, Mace was brought to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. He was just 6 standard months old when he first arrived, swaddled in silence and watched over by the serene masters of the Jedi Order. The temple, towering and peaceful, became his home. Even as a youngling, Mace was different, calm, thoughtful, and intense. He saw patterns in the Force that others did not. He was known for his discipline and for his questions, always seeking a deeper understanding of the Jedi Code. As he grew, so too did his connection to the Force. It flowed through him like a quiet stream in a still forest. At the age of 14, Mace began his Padawan training under Jedi Master Sislin Mir, a wise and patient teacher. Together, they journeyed across the galaxy on missions of peace and diplomacy. It was during this time that Mace first saw the chaos of war and the complexity of choices that did not always have simple answers. Unlike many Jedi, Mace did not fear the dark side. He studied it, understood it, and built a discipline to walk near its edge without falling. From this came his own lightsaber form, Wapad, a style that channeled inner darkness, aggression, and combat focus into light. He was elegant, fast, and dangerous. Only Mace Windu could master it fully. As the years passed, Mace became a Jedi Knight and then a Jedi Master. His skill with a lightsaber was unmatched, and his clarity of mind revered. He eventually rose to become a leading member of the Jedi High Council, second only to Master Yoda in influence. Mace believed deeply in the Jedi Code. He sought order, justice, and clarity. But the galaxy around him was changing. Shadows were growing. During the last years of the Republic, war erupted. The Clone Wars. Jedi were forced into roles as generals. Mace, though uncomfortable with this path, led with honor. He fought in many battles, including the Siege of Rylith and the Battle of Dantooine. Always, he sought peace. In the shadows of Coruscant, however, the true enemy remained hidden. Darth Sidious, Chancellor Palpatine, manipulated events from behind a mask of civility. Mace grew suspicious. The dark side clouded everything. At last, the truth was revealed. Palpatine was the Sith Lord they had searched for. In the stillness of a rainy Coruscant night, Mace confronted him. He brought with him Jedi Masters Kit Fisto, Agan Kolar, and Saesee Tiin. One by one, they fell to Sidious's blade. Only Mace remained. In a stunning duel, Mace Windu disarmed the Sith Lord, holding his purple-bladed lightsaber steady as lightning crackled across the Chancellor's face. "You are under arrest," he said. But then came Anakin Skywalker, troubled, conflicted, desperate to save the ones he loved. In a single, fateful moment, Anakin betrayed the Jedi. Mace was struck down. He fell out the window, into the night, into legend. His body was never recovered. Some believe he died that day. Others whisper that he survived. But wherever he is, Mace Windu's legacy endures. He was a guardian of peace, a master of the Force, and a warrior of unshakable resolve. His story reminds us that even in times of darkness, discipline, clarity, and inner balance can be a light. And so, beneath the stars of a galaxy far, far away, Mace Windu sleeps. May the Force be with him and with you. Long before he stood among the most respected Jedi in the galaxy, Mace Windu was a quiet child with curious eyes and a strong will, born into hardship on the wild world of Harun Kal. Harun Kal was not like the shining city planet of Coruscant. It was untamed, fierce, a place of dense jungles, roaring winds, and an ever-present struggle for survival. The Corunai people, Mace's people, were Force-sensitive warriors, guardians of their land, but even among them, Mace was unique. His parents perished while he was still an infant. Some say it was during a tribal skirmish. Others say it was nature itself that claimed them. Whatever the truth, the Force had already chosen another path for the orphaned boy. At just 6 standard months old, Mace Windu was taken by Jedi scouts to the temple on Coruscant. It was the tradition of the Jedi to identify Force-sensitive children early. The temple, ancient and serene, welcomed him like it did so many others. But Mace, young as he was, felt a deep loss, a disconnection from the roots he would never truly know. Even in the nursery halls of the temple, the masters noticed him, the way he focused so intently, the way he seemed to listen to the Force itself. He was quiet, but not passive, thoughtful, but never hesitant. While other younglings laughed and played freely, Mace was often meditating, asking questions of the universe, even before he could form the words. He was assigned to the Dragon Clan, one of many groups of younglings trained in unity. There, he learned the basics of the Jedi Code, lightsaber drills with training sabers, and the peaceful philosophy of the Order. Still, the masters could sense in him something unusual. He struggled at times not with combat nor focus, but with acceptance. He longed for structure, for purpose. He was fascinated with the Force, especially its more elusive aspects. He wanted to understand the why, not just the how. At the age of 14, after excelling beyond his peers in lightsaber training and philosophy, Mace was selected by Jedi Master Sislin Mir. She was a Mirialan Jedi, wise and patient, who sensed that beneath Mace's discipline was a storm of motion, a fire that needed focus. With Master Mir, Mace traveled far from Coruscant. Their early missions took them to frontier worlds where diplomacy was fragile. One mission brought them to the icy plains of Megiddo, where a civil war threatened to erupt. Mace learned there that peace was not always clean and justice not always clear. But through it all, he held fast to the Jedi Code. He crafted his first lightsaber after vision. Unlike most Jedi whose sabers shone blue or green, Mace's crystal, found during a solitary trial on the planet Hurricane, produced a deep violet blade, a rare color, one not seen in generations. It reflected who he was, balanced between light and shadow, strength and serenity. Even as a Padawan, he showed rare insight. He understood how close the Jedi must tread to the edge of darkness to defeat it, but also how dangerous that edge could be. This inner awareness would later form the basis of Form 7, Va-Pad, a lightsaber style that embraced aggression yet demanded absolute control. He struggled too. He was not immune to fear or doubt. But he learned to master them, not through denial, but through deep meditation, discipline, and resolve. When he finally passed the trials and became a Jedi Knight, the Council took special notice. Yoda himself once remarked that Mace saw shatter points in the Force, fractures in fate, moments of tension that could determine entire futures. It was a rare ability and a heavy responsibility. But for now, the boy from Harun Kal, once alone, once lost, had found his path. A Jedi, a guardian, a servant of peace. And his story was only just beginning. As the Republic basked in an age of relative peace, the Jedi Knights roamed the galaxy, guardians of balance, mediators of conflict, protectors of the innocent. Among them stood Mace Windu, now a Jedi Knight. He had passed the Jedi trials with calm precision and unwavering discipline. The lessons of his youth, of struggle, solitude, and stillness had become his strength. With his amethyst blade, he journeyed far from the temple, embracing the life of a Jedi with quiet purpose. The galaxy was vast, a sea of stars and countless systems, each with their own joy and their own troubles. Mace traveled to them not with a warrior's pride, but with a listener's heart. He mediated water disputes on the dusty world of Jakelia, resolved trade wars on Selvaris. On Dantooine, he stood between two tribes whose blood feud had lasted centuries, and convinced them to lay down their arms with nothing more than truth, patience, and the will of the Force. But not all missions ended in peace. On a distant planet called Hurricane, Mace was sent to investigate reports of violence. The native crystalline beings saw him as a threat. He was attacked, hurt, but instead of retaliating, Mace extended his hand. In doing so, he won their trust, and from them he received a gift, a rare kyber crystal, deep violet and filled with resonance. It would later form the heart of his legendary purple-bladed lightsaber. Mace Windu was not without struggle. The Jedi way demanded the letting go of attachment, but Mace cared deeply for those he served. He often wondered, how can one protect without connection? How can one care and yet remain detached? These were questions that shaped him, not as weaknesses, but as truths he wrestled with in meditation and in battle. He trained under great masters, and then, in time, began to train others. He studied lightsaber forms with intensity. While many chose the elegant Form 2 or the balanced Form 4, Mace sought something deeper. He explored Form 7, a style thought too dangerous by many, a form that flirted with aggression and edge. Through focus and self-discipline, he transformed it. He created Vapad, a form that allowed a Jedi to channel the darkness around them, but never submit to it. Only a few could use it safely. Mace was the only one who ever mastered it fully. It was during this time that he began to foresee ripples in the Force, quiet disturbances, shadows that didn't move like normal. The peace of the Republic, while beautiful, was beginning to fray at its edges. His clarity and resolve earned him a seat on the Jedi High Council even before his 40th year, a rare honor. He sat alongside Jedi like Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, and the ancient Master Yoda. Mace brought to the council not only wisdom and power, but a strong sense of order. He believed that the Jedi should act with firm conviction, guided by the code and not by the shifting winds of politics. He was never unkind, but he could be stern, never cruel, but unflinching. He carried the heavy burden of leadership with poise, always seeking truth, even when it was uncomfortable. And so, Mace Windu stood at the peak of Jedi excellence, a master of the blade, a master of the self, a voice of clarity in a galaxy growing dimmer by the day. But even he, with all his insight and strength, could not yet see the storm that approached. In the calm before the Clone Wars, The Jedi Order stood on the edge of change, and Mace Windu, guardian of balance, watcher of shadows, remained ever vigilant, waiting, listening, guided by the Force. The stars, once peaceful, began to flicker under the weight of fear. Whispers of war spread across the galaxy, systems seceding, worlds choosing sides, a movement that began as political protest, twisted into something darker, and at the center of it all, the Jedi. They had once been guardians of peace. Now they were asked to become generals. Mace Windu did not seek war. He had devoted his life to avoiding conflict. But as the Clone Wars ignited across 1,000 worlds, he knew the Jedi could not stand aside. Peace sometimes had to be defended with a lightsaber. He stepped into this role with quiet reluctance, leading Republic forces not out of pride, but out of duty. With the Grand Army of the Republic, millions of clone soldiers bred for battle, he fought on many fronts. On Ryloth, he freed the Twi'lek people from occupation, walking side by side with their leaders. On Dantooine, he led a fierce counter-assault that held the line against overwhelming odds. On Geonosis, he had stood among the first to ignite his blade in full-scale combat, leading Jedi into battle against the Separatist droid army. But each battle left a mark. Mace could feel the toll war took, not just on the Republic, but on the Jedi themselves. Once guardians of balance, they now commanded troops, plotted strategy, and made decisions that cost thousands of lives. It disturbed him. In the quiet of the temple, he often sat alone in meditation. "The Force is clouded," he whispered. "Shadows deepen. There was a presence in the galaxy, a hidden hand moving events from behind the curtain." Mace began to sense it, though he could not see its face. He watched Chancellor Palpatine grow in power, granted emergency authority, then more and more again, always for the sake of security. Mace did not trust him. He believed in the Republic, but began to doubt its leadership. He believed in the Jedi, but worried they were being drawn away from their true path. When Anakin Skywalker, a powerful young Jedi Knight, grew closer to the Chancellor, Mace grew wary. He sensed in Anakin a storm of emotion, potential for greatness, but also for darkness. Mace never hated Anakin, but he did not fully trust him. And yet, he fought beside him again and again through battles, betrayals, and victories that blurred the lines between light and dark. As the war dragged on, Mace found himself forced to make impossible decisions. He ordered strikes that ended conflicts but took lives. He stood before Senate committees, questioning the Republic's direction. He tried, in his own quiet way, to hold the center, to keep the Jedi grounded in the Force, even as the galaxy spun out of balance. He kept himself steady through it all. But even Mace Windu, with all his clarity, could not escape the creeping sense of inevitability. The Force trembled. A reckoning was coming, and Mace knew. The Jedi would not be able to stop it through strength alone. They would need wisdom, resolve, and sacrifice. To many across the galaxy, Mace Windu was known as a warrior, a leader, a voice of strength within the Jedi Council. But to those within the Order, he was something more, and sometimes something harder to understand. Mace Windu held himself to the highest standards. Discipline, clarity, control, these were not words he simply believed in. They were how he lived, and so he asked the same of others. To the Jedi Masters who sat beside him on the High Council, he was deeply respected, sometimes even feared. His insights were sharp, his questions direct, his decisions rarely shaken. Yet within the quiet of the council chamber, he worked closely with Master Yoda, trusting in Yoda's ancient wisdom. The two disagreed at times, but their bond ran deep, rooted in shared purpose. With Obi-Wan Kenobi, Mace shared a mutual respect. Obi-Wan's calm demeanor and humility earned Mace's trust. While they were not close friends, they often saw the world in similar ways, through the lens of duty and restraint. When Obi-Wan was sent to face General Grievous, it was Mace who endorsed the mission. A silent gesture of confidence. But not all relationships came easily to him. With Anakin Skywalker, there was tension. Mace sensed great power in the young knight, but also danger. Anakin's emotions ran hot. His attachments, his pride, his impatience, these troubled Mace deeply. Though he never sought to humiliate Anakin, he often held him at a distance. He did not do this out of cruelty. He did it out of caution. When Anakin asked to be made a Jedi Master upon joining the council, Mace denied him. "You are on this council," he said, "but we do not grant you the rank of Master." It was not meant as an insult, but as a message. Trust must be earned, not demanded. And yet, perhaps if Mace had reached out, softened his edge, offered more guidance, perhaps things could have been different. With other Jedi, Mace was a pillar of structure. To Kit Fisto, the cheerful Nautolan master, Mace offered tactical respect, often placing him in key roles during war councils. With Depa Billaba, his former Padawan, he shared a close and complex bond. She had once followed him into battle, but during the war, she broke. Driven to madness by the horrors she witnessed, Depa fell into a coma. This haunted Mace deeply. He never spoke of it often, but in his private reflections he asked himself if his strict teachings had pushed her too far, if his belief in the path of the Jedi had blinded him to her pain. For all his discipline, Mace Windu did care. He simply struggled to show it. He believed that Jedi must be guardians, not friends, that to love too freely was to risk the fall. Still, in small ways, he showed his compassion, a patient correction during lightsaber training, a quiet word of encouragement after mission, a steady presence in moments of fear. He carried the weight of leadership with such intensity that few ever saw beyond the armor. But beneath that armor was a man who had given everything to the Jedi, to protect others, to hold the line, to do what was right, even when it cost him connection, warmth, even trust. And in the end, when he stood alone in front of Darth Sidious, betrayed by the very Jedi he had kept at arm's length, he met his fate not with anger, but with acceptance. Because that was who Mace Windu was, a Jedi, a sentinel, and perhaps a man who gave so much of himself to the galaxy that there was little left to give to himself. Mace Windu had always been cautious, not out of fear, but out of clarity. He understood that power, true power, was rarely loud. It whispered, it crept, it offered comfort before it demanded obedience. In his meditations, he often reflected on how quickly justice could become control and how righteousness, when left unchecked, could harden into tyranny. It was this awareness, this sober, unflinching clarity that shaped Mace's relationship with the galaxy's highest office, and with the man who held it, Chancellor Palpatine. From the beginning, Mace watched him, not with open hostility nor even suspicion, but with an alert, measured care. Palpatine had come to power during a time of confusion and uncertainty. A senator from Naboo, soft-spoken and unassuming, he rose swiftly through the ranks of the Republic. He smiled often, spoke in calm tones, and never seemed to lose control. To many, he was the image of civility and reason, a man who could hold the center while others argued at the edges. He praised the Jedi Order in public. He requested their presence at state functions. He even visited the Jedi Temple on ceremonial days, walking among the great halls with respectful awe. When war began to rumble on distant worlds, he turned to the Jedi for counsel, for wisdom, for leadership. And yet, to Mace Windu, something was off. The Chancellor's aura, if one could feel such a thing through the Force, was oddly insulated. There was no obvious malice, no sharp edge of anger. But there was a stillness, a weight, that didn't move with the light. Mace often described it in his mind like the calm before a sandstorm. You don't see it, you don't hear it, but something in your bones knows it's coming. It wasn't proof. It wasn't even accusation. But it was enough to make Mace observe more closely. As the Clone Wars ignited and swept across the galaxy, Palpatine's role expanded. The Republic Senate, eager for order amid chaos, granted him emergency powers, first for a single rotation, then for a cycle, then indefinitely. "We must act swiftly," Palpatine would say, "for the safety of the Republic." Some Jedi, especially the younger ones, took no issue with it. The Republic needed stability. The Jedi were defenders of the peace, and the Chancellor was simply trying to preserve it. But Mace, he remembered old teachings, warnings about how the dark side didn't always come with red sabers and shouted threats. Sometimes it came dressed in law, with perfect diction and noble intentions. He began to voice concerns within the council chambers. "The more comfortable we become with this arrangement," he said quietly, "the harder it will be to return to the way things were." Some agreed, others urged patience, but Mace did not believe in blind trust. Every war council, every military campaign, every hollow Senate cheer wore on him. Every Jedi lost on distant battlefields weighed on his soul. These were not what the Jedi were meant to be. They had once served the Force itself, not governments, not armies. In the quiet of his quarters, Mace would sit cross-legged for hours, searching the currents of the Force. He tried to find peace, but found only clouded echoes. Something or someone was clouding everything. He began to ask the questions no one wanted to say aloud. What if the Republic we swore to protect had already fallen? What if the Sith never needed to conquer the Jedi because they had already placed themselves at the very heart of power? Among the Jedi, Mace stood firm. Where Yoda brought patience and quiet wisdom, Mace brought structure and unyielding purpose. He did not see himself as infallible, but he knew someone needed to speak plainly to hold the line while others meditated on theory. He did not reject the order. He loved it so deeply, in fact, that he feared it had lost its way. The Jedi Temple had once resonated with balance, with purpose, with stillness. Now it echoed with military updates, political strategy, and silent tension. And yet, he stayed. He served, not to preserve the image of the Jedi, but the truth of them, the light beneath the robes, the duty behind the discipline. And then the truth came. Anakin Skywalker, conflicted, raw, and shaking, revealed what Mace had long feared. Chancellor Palpatine was the Sith Lord they had been searching for, Darth Sidious, the puppet master behind the war, the storm behind the silence. Mace did not hesitate. He gathered his most trusted Jedi and moved to arrest the Chancellor, not with vengeance, but with duty, with sorrow. He had hoped, truly hoped, that he was wrong. But the moment they entered the office, the illusion shattered. Palpatine drew his red lightsaber, and in a blur of motion he struck down 3 Jedi Masters in seconds. Only Mace remained. They fought, blade against blade, purple light against crimson flame. There is a story few Jedi ever speak aloud, a story about what it means to truly walk the edge, to hear the dark side whisper and not answer its call. This is the story of Mace Windu, the only Jedi Master who studied the storm of the dark and returned untouched. Long before the Clone Wars, long before the Council, Mace Windu felt the Force differently than others. Even as a Padawan, he sensed not only its warmth and serenity, but also the turbulence beneath it. He described it once as a wound in the wind, an undercurrent of raw power that pulsed beneath the surface of reality. Most Jedi turned away from this feeling. They feared it. But Mace didn't. He was not drawn to it in hunger. He was drawn to it in curiosity. To understand the darkness, he believed, was not to embrace it, but to guard against it more completely. He sought not the dark side's strength, but its pattern, its logic. If it could tempt, then it could be tracked. If it could corrupt, then it could be contained. His journey began during his knighthood. In a remote system near the deep core, Mace undertook a solo mission to Hurricane, a shattered planet with jagged cliffs and crystalline life forms. There, in isolation, he faced his own anger for the first time, his failure, his fear. In that crucible, he did not run from those feelings. He faced them, and through them he saw a path. He meditated not to banish emotion, but to transform it. And from this trial, Mace Windu began to develop something ancient and dangerously rare, a new form of lightsaber combat, one that channeled emotion into motion. Vapad. It was unlike the other 7 forms. Where Form I was simple, Form 3 defensive, and Form Vi aggressive, Vapad was a mirror. It drew in the darkness of an opponent, their rage, their hate, and sent it back at them without letting it touch the Jedi soul. Only Mace could walk this line fully, because he did not deny the presence of darkness within himself. He simply never let it lead. It was a discipline of absolute control. One misstep, and the user would fall. But Mace's control was legendary. He did not suppress his emotions. He channeled them like a river guided by rock. Other Jedi feared Vapad. Some even called it heresy. But Yoda understood. He watched Mace closely, and he saw what few others could, that this Jedi was not falling. He was rising, because he had learned to walk through the storm and emerge in stillness. In war, Mace used this power with great care. On the battlefield, he could deflect blaster fire with uncanny rhythm, move through ranks of droids like a current through stone. His opponents felt not just skill, but presence, as if the Force itself had turned to face them. And yet, Mace never glorified combat. To him, every battle was a failure apiece. Every enemy struck down was a soul lost to the current he had chosen to resist. He believed that Jedi should be fierce only in the defense of others. That understanding the dark side gave you the wisdom to protect, not to dominate. He often meditated on a single truth. Light without understanding is blindness. Darkness without mastery is surrender. But through balance, the Force becomes clear. Few Jedi ever dared walk so close to the edge. Fewer still came back, but Mace Windu did. And because he did, the Order stood stronger, if only for a time. Not every Jedi can become a teacher of darkness, but Mace Windu became its student, and never its servant. If the Force could speak, if it could form a voice from the ancient winds of 1,000 worlds, if it could sing in the language of stars and falling leaves, it would tell the story of Mace Windu. It would not speak his name with mourning. It would not lower its tone in sorrow, because Mace Windu's fall was not a tragedy. It was a moment of truth, a moment when clarity stood alone against a galaxy grown blind, for the Force is not bound by time. It does not remember as we do, with pages and fading memories. The Force sees all at once, every breath ever taken, every blade ignited in fear or in peace. It sees the first life that emerged from a sun-swept ocean, and the last whisper of a dying Jedi in a silent chamber. To the Force, all things are present, and within its eternal flow, Mace Windu moved like a quiet storm, not brash, not boastful, but steady, like the mountain that endures 1,000 winters and still remains. The Force had known him from the very beginning, from his first breath on the wild world of Harun Kal, when the winds wrapped his orphaned soul in solitude and strength. It watched him sleep as a child beneath the towering trees of the temple, hands folded, brow furrowed in quiet thought. Even then, he listened, not just to voices, but to silence. He felt the Force not only in the light, but in the shadow it cast, and he did not fear it. That was his gift. Where others ran from the darkness, Mace studied it, not to use it, not to touch it, but to understand, to know its shape, its rhythm, its hunger, so that he could face it without falling. He became more than a warrior. He became the edge of the Jedi Order. He was discipline made flesh, focus given form. The Force often tests those it chooses. It whispers to the reckless. It offers visions to the lost. But to Mace Windu, it gave clarity, a rare kind, a dangerous kind. The kind that sees not only what is, but what must be done. He built Vahapad, a lightsaber form forged from the collision of shadow and light. It danced with danger, but never gave in. It invited darkness only to reflect it, not to absorb it. It was not a weapon of pride, but of protection. And in every motion, Mace stood in conversation with the Force, and the Force always listened. When he walked into the Chancellor's office for the final time, lightning already in the air, it was not rage he carried. It was resolution, because Mace Windu had seen the rot beneath the robes. He had looked into the still, smiling face of Darth Sidious and saw not a man, but a void, a silence that consumed truth, a power not born of strength, but of corrosion. The Force in that moment held its breath, for the path ahead forked in 3 directions: compromise, blindness, sacrifice, and Mace chose the third. He lifted his blade, violet like twilight, not in anger, but in finality. He did not desire to kill. He desired to end what should never have begun. He stood in judgment, not of a man, but of a movement, of a century of deception, pulled slowly, thread by thread, across the Republic's soul. But even clarity cannot stop fate, and fate came, not with fire, but with a broken heart. Anakin Skywalker, the child of prophecy, the trembling storm, the soul torn between fear and love, between destiny and doubt. His decision shattered the stillness, a shatter point, the very thing Mace Windu had spent a lifetime sensing. Those fragile cracks in the web of fate where one choice rewrites the galaxy. Anakin chose, and Mace fell. Through glass, through lightning, through wind and rain and silence. The Force did not catch him. It did not intervene. It simply watched, not out of cruelty, but out of reverence, for it understood what he carried with him in that fall, the weight of every life he had protected, the burden of every decision made in silence, the flame of every truth he upheld, even when no one listened. He did not scream. He did not beg. He let go, not of hope, but of control. He released himself into the current, into the waiting arms of the Force. The galaxy above would say he died that night. They would say the wind swallowed him, that the rain washed away his name. But the Force knows better. It knows that energy never dies. It bends, it weaves, it becomes memory, dream, echo. It becomes lesson. And so the echo of Mace Windu, his will, his silence, his blade, drifts still through the unseen spaces, through the temple ruins, through the thoughts of young Jedi who feel the need to walk a path with no name. He is still there, not gone, not forgotten, just waiting for the day the galaxy remembers what it truly means to be Jedi, not to fight, not to win, but to stand, to hold the center, to walk without fear, to face the storm with clarity, and never blink. And now, in this quiet night, this moment between stars and sleep, let that story remain with you. Drift through your thoughts like, what if the story did not end in fire? What if the fall from the window was not the end? The galaxy believes Mace Windu died that night, that he fell into the heart of the storm, broken and lost forever. The official record closed its pages. The temple was burned, the Jedi were scattered, and his name, once spoken with reverence, faded into silence. But perhaps the Force had other plans. Not all endings are truly endings. Some are beginnings, quiet ones, hidden ones, that grow like seeds beneath the soil. Imagine this. Far from Coruscant's lights, beyond the reach of probes, patrols, and politics, hidden deep in the outer rim, lies a forgotten world. It is not mapped. It is not charted. Its skies are quiet, its trees tall, its oceans deep and slow. There are no cities, no satellites. Just the sound of wind in the leaves, the rhythm of waves brushing stone, and stars that shine unbothered by war. And there, on a mountain overlooking the sea, stands a small dwelling, nothing more than stone walls, a fire pit, and a roof of woven branches. And in the soft golden glow of twilight, an old man sits by the fire. He wears no armor, no robes. His clothes are plain. His hands are weathered. His body bears the long story of pain, scars etched across his arms, across his chest, across his soul. And yet his eyes are sharp, his posture straight, his breath slow and even, like the world itself has taught him how to be still. This is Mace Windu, alive, changed, but awake. He did not die that night, not truly. The Force caught him, cradled him, carried him to safety, broken in body, but not in spirit. He awoke beneath a starlit sky, battered but breathing, and he understood. The galaxy had turned a page. There was no room left for a Jedi like him. Not yet. Not in a galaxy that had chosen fear. And so he did not seek revenge. He did not hunt the Sith. He did not scream into the void. He simply disappeared into the deep, into the silence, into a kind of exile no one imposed, but that he accepted all the same, because he knew the Jedi had failed, not just in war, but in understanding. They had lost their way, not from lack of courage, but from a lack of balance. And balance had always been Mace Windu's path. Even now, in solitude, he remains what he always was, a guardian, a silent sentinel, a watcher between light and shadow. Each morning, he rises with the sun and walks barefoot across the cliffs. He listens to the tide. He feels the pulse of the force in the wind, in the birdsong, in the stillness of a world untouched by battle. He meditates beneath a lone tree, carved into the rock by years of wind and time. And in his mind he speaks, not to others, but to the force itself, as one would speak to an old friend. He reflects on the years of war, on the Council's decisions, on the boy named Anakin Skywalker, who could not escape the storm within. He does not speak in blame. He does not linger in anger. He simply seeks to understand. And sometimes, on clear nights, he watches the stars move slowly across the black sky. He sees flashes of ships above the horizon, Imperial shuttles, rebel transports, wanderers crossing the edge of known space. He does not interfere, but he watches, and he remembers. He remembers what it meant to stand in front of darkness and not flinch, what it meant to say no when others said wait, what it meant to be the last one standing, calm, resolved, clear. The galaxy may have forgotten him, but he has not forgotten it, and he knows, if the time ever comes, if one day someone comes seeking a truth deeper than power, a path older than fear, a voice that speaks not from above, but from within, he will be ready. Because Mace Windu was never about glory. He was not made of politics or prophecy. He was made of something quieter, something deeper. Clarity, stillness, conviction. These things do not burn, they do not rot, they do not fade. They simply wait. And so the fire beside him crackles gently in the night. The waves rise and fall like breath. The stars shine on. The forest moves like a quiet river around him. He does not speak. He does not move. He is simply present. And somewhere beyond the stars the galaxy turns, slowly, silently, healing, waiting. And in that same stillness, you are safe too. The story is done for now. The voices have softened. The shadows have passed. You may rest. Breathe deeply, let go. The Force is with you and always will be. Good night.
The Clone Wars had engulfed the galaxy, plunging star systems into chaos and straining the Jedi Order to its limits. Among the most renowned Jedi warriors stood Anakin Skywalker and his former master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Their names echoed from the battlefields of Christophsis to the siege lines of Umbara. Although teacher and student, they were more than that, brothers forged by fire and loyalty. This is a chronicle of their shared trials during the war that reshaped the fate of the Republic. On the planet of Munilinst in the early days of the war, the two Jedi stood atop a crumbling command post surveying a battlefield strewn with twisted droid wreckage and smoke-choked craters. Obi-Wan adjusted his gear, wiping grit from his brow as Anakin impatiently fiddled with the control panel of a downed speeder. Despite their banter, there was a current of respect between them that few could match. The Republic had deployed them to deal with a separatist banking clan outpost rumored to be developing prototype artillery droids with adaptive learning programs. Speed was critical. The longer they delayed, the more entrenched the droids became. Anakin opted for an unconventional strategy. Rather than call for clone reinforcements, he infiltrated the factory complex with a squad of ARC troopers using underground cistern tunnels. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, led a feint attack against the eastern flank, drawing the attention of the main separatist forces. Communication was scarce, and the plan risked separating the two Jedi for too long. But their trust in each other ran deeper than tactical calculation. Inside the factory, Anakin faced swarms of droids adapting faster with each skirmish. Lightsaber in hand, he carved a path toward the command core, disabling the central processing unit. just as the ARC troopers rigged the explosive charges. At the same moment, Obi-Wan's forces retreated into the city outskirts, leading dozens of droid tanks in pursuit. With perfect coordination, Anakin triggered the charges, collapsing the factory and short-circuiting the attacking battalion. In the dusty aftermath, as the sun pierced the gloom, Obi-Wan found his former Padawan waiting on the edge of the ruin with a self-satisfied grin. As the clones regrouped, Obi-Wan shook his head, half in exasperation, half in admiration. Anakin's instinct had nearly gotten them killed again, but it had worked. That mission marked one of many moments when their contrasting styles saved one another. Obi-Wan's meticulous discipline and Anakin's daring spontaneity were not at odds, they were complementary. Together, they formed an unstoppable force, capable of turning tides across the stars. Yet beneath every victory, the war carved deeper into their hearts and minds. As the war dragged on, every campaign became a chapter in a saga of camaraderie, courage, and growing unease. The galaxy changed them even as they fought to preserve it. But on that war-scorched day on Munilinst, their bond remained unshaken, their legacy only just beginning. Weeks later, the Jedi were dispatched to the Fogladon world of Cato Nemoidia, a planet of hanging cities and swaying bridges suspended over bottomless gorges. The Separatists had begun infiltrating the Neimoidian leadership, attempting to draw the planet into their fold. Obi-Wan kept a wary eye on their surroundings, his senses extended through the Force. They soon discovered the sabotage had come not from outside, but from a rogue Jedi General Pong Krell, presumed killed weeks prior in a failed assault on Felucia. Twisted by his lust for power, Krell had defected and established a shadow network among Neimoidian nobles, exploiting the local tensions for his own gain. Obi-Wan approached, resting a hand on his shoulder, reminding him that fear and doubt were natural, but they must not guide his path. In their quiet moments, the Jedi rarely spoke of such things, but they were there in every glance, in every silence shared between battles. The Clone Wars were not just fought in the stars, but in the hearts of those who carried its burden. Anakin nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Each mission brought him closer to something he couldn't yet name a churning storm inside that no battlefield could quiet. He respected Obi-Wan more than anyone in the galaxy. Yet part of him questioned everything he was taught. The Republic needed a swift, yet discreet intervention. Anakin and Obi-Wan arrived under diplomatic pretense, but the welcome was anything but cordial. Their starship was sabotaged mid-landing, forcing a crash that left them stranded on the outer fringes of a decaying sky city. With no time to regroup, Anakin took the lead, navigating the mist-veiled walkways with the kind of intuition that bordered on clairvoyant. Tracking him through the labyrinthine structures proved treacherous. Krell had laid traps and had a band of disillusioned clones at his command. The confrontation came at twilight on a weathered bridge high above the chasm. The wind howled and lightning flickered across the horizon. Anakin confronted Krell head-on, while Obi-Wan dueled the turncoat Escards in a dizzying dance of saber and breath. Krell was a force of raw brutality, wielding twin blades and no longer restrained by the Jedi Code. He taunted Anakin with visions of betrayal, claiming the Republic was already lost, and that Anakin's power would only be shackled by blind loyalty. But Anakin held firm as strikes, furious yet controlled. Obi-Wan joined the battle, disarming the last of Krell's forces, and together they overwhelmed the former Jedi. Rather than kill him, they imprisoned Krell for trial, hoping still that justice might remind the galaxy of what the Jedi stood for. The clone troopers they rescued looked at the Jedi with a newfound mixture of reverence and unease. Krell's betrayal had shaken their faith, and the lines between ally and enemy had blurred. As they waited for extraction, Anakin stood near the edge of the bridge, staring into the abyss below. That night, the war stole another sliver of innocence. Though the mission was deemed a success, it left scars no healing could erase. The call to action led them next to the Outer Rim mining colony of Skako Minor, where the Techno-Union had seized control of critical communication towers. Intelligence hinted at an encrypted signal source potentially broadcasting tactical data to Separatist fleets. Anakin's approach was swift and brutal, engaging a squadron of droid enforcers in a flash of blue light and blaster fire. The designs mirrored those used on Geonosis, but had been refined with cybernetic implants and primitive neural interfaces. It wasn't just technology, it was evolution forced at blaster point. But volatile, and more than a few whispered that he fought like a man with something to prove. Obi-Wan remained quiet but deeply concerned. In Anakin's heart burned a passion that made him a hero of the Republic, but also a candidate for tragedy. The mastermind behind it was Wat Tambor, a techno-union foreman who prided himself on efficiency over ethics. Even Rex felt the unease gnawing at the edges of his loyalty. The Jedi were winning battles, but losing ground within themselves. Anakin smiled during the debriefing, but it didn't reach his eyes. Obi-Wan watched his former Padawan walk away, wondering how many more victories they could endure before one broke them completely. When Obi-Wan confronted him, Tambor unleashed a modified enforcer droid that nearly overpowered the Jedi Master before Anakin burst in, igniting his blade with fury. Every skirmish drew him deeper into the facility and deeper into a state of intensity that blurred the line between necessity and aggression. In desperation, Anakin channeled the Force, pulling shattered conduits into a makeshift bridge to recover fragments of the broadcast. His eyes burned with intensity, his grip on the Force pushing limits. Obi-Wan rarely witnessed outside moments of crisis. They retrieved the coordinates of multiple hidden Separatist supply caches strung throughout the Outer Rim. But the real victory came at a cost. Rex noticed it, but said nothing. Like many clones, he admired Anakin's courage and willingness to lead from the front, but the edge in his eyes was hard to ignore. Anakin and Obi-Wan arrived under cover of night, their dropship, narrowly evading anti-air batteries that lit the skies like a storm. The terrain was harsh, jagged spires of obsidian rising from a choking mist. But what unsettled them most was the silence. No sign of civilians, only the faint hum of droid patrols and the eerie glow of transmitter pylons. They split up to cover more ground, Anakin flanked by Captain Rex and a scout unit, while Obi-Wan infiltrated the central spire under stealth. Inside the tower, Obi-Wan discovered a laboratory containing suspended stasis chambers, housing prototype droids, hybrids of machine and organic tissue. Together, they brought down the droid, but Tambor escaped, triggering a data purge that collapsed the Tower-S mainframe. As they regrouped, the clone troopers silently exchanged glances. Word had spread of Anakin's command style bold when they left Skako. Minor behind its towers collapsed in the distance, and the cold wind bit harder than before. The Jedi were next sent to the war-torn moon of Jagunda, a forested world veiled in perpetual twilight and cloaked by native electromagnetic storms. The Separatists had established a cloaking array hidden deep in the jungle, disrupting Republic scanners and shielding a fleet mustering site in orbit. The mission was to dismantle the array, but the terrain and interference made communication nearly impossible. The Jedi found themselves outnumbered and cornered atop a moss-covered structure. As the sentries advanced with buzzing, energy blades, and metallic chants, it resonated with unstable power, sending violent tremors through the jungle. With effort, they severed the crystal S-link to the nexus, burying it under stone and sealing the chamber with the Force. Obi-Wan sensed it too, but chose not to press. It had begun not just the end of the war, but the beginning of something much darker. And he knew deep down that the galaxy would never be the same. He hoped their bond would be enough to guide Anakin back from the edges he seemed drawn to. The jungle grew still, and the interference vanished. Republic reinforcements landed within the hour, securing the sector and confirming the Separatists had used the natural disruption to mask their fleet movements, which were now exposed to the Republic Navy. Anakin was drawn to it, entranced by its raw potential. He placed his hand upon the crystal, and for a moment the visions come a fire of betrayal, of a dark figure cloaked in shadow, and a galaxy broken under war. The battle was fierce, but the Force flowed strong in both nights. Anakin's aggression proved vital, dispatching enemies with precise fury, while Obi-Wan countered their tactics through misdirection and defense. Together, they neutralized the threat and uncovered a hidden passage leading beneath the temple. Anakin and Obi-Wan descended into the thick canopy, accompanied only by a single squad of clones, navigating by instinct and intuition alone. The jungle was alive with unseen dangers. Massive predatory creatures stalked the shadows, and even the trees seemed to shift with unnatural rhythm. Anakin felt the pulse of the world around him, chaotic and primal. Obi-Wan focused his awareness, calming his breath and guiding the squad through the unknown. As they advanced, they discovered evidence of an ancient civilization long since overtaken by the wilderness. Crumbling ziggurats half swallowed by vines revealed strange carvings that mirrored Jedi iconography, albeit distorted and older than any archives recorded. While investigating the ruins, they triggered a dormant defense system, K, awakening automated sentries infused with ancient weaponry. There they discovered the true source of the interference, not a separatist array, but a force nexus corrupted and amplified by a shard of kyber crystal embedded within the ruins. Obi-Wan pulled him back, urging caution, reminding him that the crystal was not meant to be wielded, but understood. As they departed Jagunda, Anakin remained unusually silent. He had felt something in that chamber, something that clung to his soul like ash. That night under the jungle stars, Anakin watched the sky shift above and whispered a single phrase to himself, not of hope or fear, but of destiny. Weeks passed, and the war intensified. Intelligence reports drew Anakin and Obi-Wan to the icy moon of Zepho, Prime, where separatist scientists had been experimenting with kyber crystal reactors to create a localized gravitational weapon. As they moved deeper, Anakin began feeling strange echoes in the force fragments of suffering, flashes of reverence for a power long suppressed. The lead scientist, a cold, analytical Umbreon named Vrata, tried to stall them with theories of evolution through chaos. He spoke of the Force as a pattern to be rewritten, not followed. Aboard the Republic cruiser, Obi-Wan confronted Anakin. He admired his bravery, but feared his recklessness. Anakin waved it off as necessity. He watched and waited. He no longer saw only the boy he once trained, but a man standing at the crossroads of destiny. What path Anakin would take was hidden even from the Force. But one truth rang louder each day. The Clone Wars were no longer just about Republic and Separatists. They were becoming a crucible for everything the Jedi believed, and the fire was only growing. But the toll on his body and spirit lingered. He had seen something inside that Mountain Man image of power without chains, of a galaxy reshaped by will rather than compromise. He didn't speak it aloud, but it etched itself behind his eyes. Anakin confronted him with disdain, but also curiosity. The concept of shaping destiny rather than submitting to it resonated more than he cared to admit. Sensing layers to the conflict that defied political explanation, Yoda said little, but his silence was heavy. The Council's trust in Anakin was growing strained, and yet they continued to rely on him more than ever. Obi-Wan noted the architectural style mirrored that of early Jedi temples, but warped, as if the builders had begun in harmony with the Force and then diverged. The system resisted, its feedback loops overloading. Anakin bypassed protocol, channeling the Force directly into the control mechanism, a dangerous maneuver that nearly cost him his life. Doiwin stabilized him, guiding him out just as the mountain began to rupture from within. They escaped through a collapsing ice tunnel, emerging into blinding daylight as the peak behind them cracked and folded in on itself, entombing the forbidden energy once more. The presence in the chamber was neither light nor dark, but something older. The facility was buried beneath a glacier, riddled with unstable tunnels and ancient Zephonian ruins. The mission was simple on the surface: sabotage the reactor and evacuate before the meltdown. But nothing in the Clone Wars was ever simple. They entered through a fissure in the ice, descending into a tomb of ancient echoing halls lined with forgotten statues and inscriptions in a language lost to time. Upon locating the reactor, they discovered the Separatists had failed to harness the crystal's power it had fused with the mountain itself, sending shockwaves through both technology and terrain. With time short, the Jedi evacuated personnel and began the shutdown.
Later.
The mission was classified a success, but the incident was sealed from public record. The Jedi Council worried about what had been uncovered. As for Obi-Wan, weeks passed and the war intensified. Intelligence reports drew Anakin and Obi-Wan to the icy moon of Zepho, Prime, where Separatist scientists had been experimenting with kyber crystal reactors to create a localized gravitational weapon. As they moved deeper, Anakin began feeling strange echoes in the force fragments of suffering, flashes of reverence for a power long suppressed. The lead scientist, a cold, analytical Umbreon named Vrata, tried to stall them with theories of evolution through chaos. The system resisted, its feedback loops overloading. Anakin bypassed protocol, channeling the Force directly into the control mechanism, a dangerous maneuver that nearly cost him his life. Anakin waved it off as necessity, but the toll on his body and spirit lingered. The Jedi Council worried about what had been uncovered, sensing layers to the conflict that defied political explanation. Yoda said little, but his silence was heavy. The Council's trust in Anakin was growing strained, and yet they continued to rely on him more than ever. He had seen something inside that Mountain Man image of power without chains, of a galaxy reshaped by will rather than compromise. He no longer saw only the boy he once trained, but a man standing at the crossroads of destiny. What path Anakin would take was hidden even from the Force. But one truth rang louder each day. The Clone Wars were no longer just about Republic and Separatists. They were becoming a crucible for everything the Jedi believed, and the fire was only growing. He didn't speak it aloud, but it etched itself behind his eyes. Obi-Wan stabilized him, guiding him out just as the mountain began to rupture from within. They escaped through a collapsing ice tunnel, emerging into blinding daylight as the peak behind them cracked and folded in on itself, entombing the forbidden energy once more. He spoke of the Force as a pattern to be rewritten, not followed. Anakin confronted him with disdain, but also curiosity. The concept of shaping destiny rather than submitting to it resonated more than he cared to admit. Obi-Wan noted the architectural style mirrored that of early Jedi temples, but warped, as if the builders had begun in harmony with the Force and then diverged. The presence in the chamber was neither light nor dark, but something older. The facility was buried beneath a glacier riddled with unstable tunnels and ancient Zephonian ruins. The mission was simple on the surface: sabotage the reactor and evacuate before the meltdown. But nothing in the Clone Wars was ever simple. They entered through a fissure in the ice, descending into a tomb of ancient echoing halls lined with forgotten statues and inscriptions in a language lost to time. Upon locating the reactor, they discovered the Separatists had failed to harness the crystal's power. It had fused with the mountain itself, sending shockwaves through both technology and terrain. With time short, the Jedi evacuated personnel and began the shutdown. Later, aboard the Republic cruiser, Obi-Wan confronted Anakin. He admired his bravery, but feared his recklessness. The mission was classified as success, but the incident was sealed from public record. As for Obi-Wan, he watched and waited. The next assignment pulled Anakin and Obi-Wan to the industrial system of Nixer, where Separatists had established a shielded manufacturing world orbiting a dying sun. Intelligence from Republic spies indicated the site was mass-producing prototype battle droids powered by energy siphoned directly from solar flares. The planet's magnetic storms and collapsing star made standard approaches suicidal. But as usual, Anakin saw opportunity in danger. They flew into the atmosphere under heavy fire, navigating plasma surges and gravitational fluxes that threatened to tear their ship apart. The Separatists were not only learning how to replicate Jedi technology, they were weaponizing it. It nearly overwhelmed both Jedi, mimicking their stances and intercepting Force movements. Obi-Wan was knocked unconscious mid-battle, leaving Anakin to fight alone. His anger surged, not reckless but focused, and with a surge of raw will, he crushed the droid's core with the Force. The energy backlash fried several consoles and shattered the viewing panels, but the silence that followed felt like victory. Obi-Wan felt the weight of this realization settle deep. The line between the sacred and the profane was vanishing. As they evacuated, Anakin remarked that soon there would be enemies the Jedi could not outthink, only outmatch. But for the Jedi, it was another harbinger. Technology was evolving faster than wisdom. Power was being reshaped in ways they could not foresee. And in Anakin, that evolution had already begun. Obi-Wan was troubled by the words, but more so by the way they were said. They weren't speculation, they were certainty. Anakin stared at one of the shattered saber hilts for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, it was with a voice calm but devoid of warmth. If they can mimic the Force, they'll try to replace us. Anakin's reckless piloting skill turned what should have been a suicide. Run into a daring landing amid the upper platforms of the production towers. They fought in coordinated flocks, adapting within seconds. Anakin relished the challenge, slicing through in a dance of fire and fury, while Obi-Wan analyzed their patterns, finding their vulnerability and exposed cooling valve on the back of each unit. Working together with the clones, they disabled the central tower, but the deeper they pushed into the facility, the more disturbing its purpose became. Obi-Wan, grim as ever, held back commentary until their boots hit the scorched deck. "Next time, let me pick the route," he muttered, brushing ash from his robes. Inside, they encountered a new class of droid, agile, multi-limbed, capable of limited force resistance due to electromagnetic counterpulses built into their systems. They uncovered experiments on kyber energy absorption using captured Padawan lightsabers as conduits. In the control hub, they faced off against an experimental command droid capable of predictive combat routines. Obi-Wan woke to Anakin standing still amid the wreckage, his eyes distant. There were no cheers, no witty remarks, only quiet. The mission's data would be invaluable to the Republic, and the facility's destruction marked a rare strategic triumph. Beneath his cloak, he kept one of the shattered lightsaber crystals from the lab, its glow faint but steady like a question that would not be silenced. The next mission brought them to the scorched fields of Moritaris, a once thriving world now consumed by ceaseless battle. Republic analysts had traced the movement of a rogue separatist warlord, General Nix, emerging beneath the fortress walls. Their Nix had prepared for them. Obi-Wan and Anakin moved in perfect rhythm, an old harmony forged through years of trust. Together, they struck, disarming him and forcing him to yield. The general collapsed in silence, not with rage, but with a strange satisfaction, as if confirming something he had long suspected. The stronghold was laced with sonic disruptors that scrambled force perception and holographic decoys that mimicked friendly signatures. The battle that followed was disorienting and vicious. Moritaris was saved, but at what cost? The Jedi were being hunted, not just physically but philosophically. They're won by choosing the kind of man you wish to remain. And slowly, Anakin saw the arguments of his enemies begin to echo in his mind, twisting into questions he couldn't silence. Anakin fought through confusion and traps, pushing forward with sheer willpower. Obi-Wan used patience and sharp instinct, anchoring their progress with tactical strikes and defensive positioning. To the planet's northern hemisphere, they found Nix, not in armor, but in a command chamber lit by real fire, surrounded by battle plans carved into the walls like scripture. He welcomed them, not as enemies, but as prophets of a failing age. He claimed the Jedi had become symbols, not warriors. Relics wrapped in robes who played at peace while sending soldiers to die. Anakin's fury erupted at his words, igniting a clash that shattered walls and melted steel, where he had commandeered a derelict fortress city and established a mobile operations center. Nix was not like other droid generals. He was human, brilliant, unpredictable. Obi-Wan joined. Flowing between Nix's relentless strikes and Anakin's explosive momentum. But the general had a trick of his own. He had injected himself with an experimental serum that heightened reflexes and pain resistance to near-inhuman levels. Even wounded, Nix laughed. He told Anakin that the war had already decided what kind of man he was becoming. All that remained was to admit it, as known to target Jedi personally. The Council feared he sought more than victory. He wanted to break the myth of Jedi invincibility. Anakin and Obi-Wan arrived on the edge of a burning plain. Guided by local resistance fighters whose homes had been razed by Nix's campaign, the air reeked of ash and melted steel. The planet bled war. Each ruin told a story, and each survivor bore witness to the price of this endless conflict. Anakin took it personally. He had seen too many worlds like this, and every time the desire to end it, all swift and final, grew stronger. They infiltrated the outer perimeter using abandoned sewer routes. In the heart of the fortress, the duel raged through the crumbling compound. In the end, it wasn't strength that defeated Nix, it was unity. After the battle, Anakin stood at the ruins, gazing toward the smoking horizon. Obi-Wan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Victories aren't only won with sabers," he said gently. Anakin didn't answer. He watched the smoke curl toward the sky and thought not of peace, but of the day when he wouldn't have to choose anymore. An urgent transmission redirected them to the capital world of Korrilag, where a former Republic senator had broken ranks and established an independent regime. Though officially neutral, the system had begun supplying separatists with weapons and intelligence. The Republic couldn't risk escalation, so they sent Anakin and Obi-Wan to broker a solution piece if possible, subterfuge if necessary. The Jedi weren't diplomats by trade, but the line between Saber and Senate was growing thinner with every cycle of the war. Tanis tried to flee, but Obi-Wan disabled his ship and restrained him with the Force. What had once been clear victory, just as peace now, twisted into paradox. Obi-Wan knew the signs. The boy he trained had grown into a storm of certainty and doubt. The war had made him strong, but it also stripped away the layers that protected him from what lay beneath. They transmitted the evidence to the Senate. By the time Corlag's people saw the truth, it was too late for Tanis. Anakin was beginning to wonder if the enemy had always been external or if part of it now stared back at him in every reflection. He was taken into custody, but his final words haunted Anakin. "You think you've saved them? But they'll remember you as the ones who couldn't let go." Upon arrival, they were greeted with pageantry and polite resistance. The Senator Vorian Tanis welcomed them with hollow charm, masking distrust behind protocol. The planet's population admired him. He had kept Coruscant safe while other systems burned. But his methods grew more authoritarian each day, and whispers of suppression and secret prisons filled the undercurrents. Anakin saw only hypocrisy. Obi-Wan, ever cautious, advised restraint. Their goal was to uncover Tanis's true loyalties and dismantle his separatist links without turning public opinion. Over the course of several days, they played the game, galas, councils, and carefully phrased discussions beneath chandeliers and surveillance. Yet Anakin chafed under the pretense. He followed leads through the city's underbelly, discovering shipments of forbidden tech routed through shell companies. In the shadows of neon alleys, he confronted black market engineers, pressuring them for names. Obi-Wan warned him not to act on impulse, but the divide between careful observation and direct justice was wearing thin. Eventually, they tracked the flow of weapons to an abandoned palace on the outskirts of the city, now a fortress disguised in neglect. There they uncovered a vast vault of separatist goods and documents proving that Tanis had been selling his people's future for promises of dominion in a post-republic. Order. As they prepared to expose him, Tanis arrived, flanked by his private guard. The confrontation was cold and unyielding. Tanis claimed the Jedi had no authority, that they were relics enforcing a broken code on a galaxy that no longer wanted it. A fight broke out. Anakin surged forward without hesitation, cutting through guards like wind through leaves. As they departed Corlag, Anakin sat alone in the gunship, his jaw tight. Not every planet burned, not every victory rang hollow. But moments of clarity were fleeting. The final days of the war lead Anakin and Obi-Wan to the world of Thalara, a former Jedi-affiliated sanctuary that had remained neutral for centuries. Intelligence revealed that a mysterious Signal One, encoded in ancient Jedi language, had originated from the planet's mountains, and the Council believed it might be connected to a buried Sith relic. Thalara felt alive, not just with life, but with presence. Each turn triggered memories. Illusions drawn from their pasts. Appeared Qui-Gon's voice. Laughter, even visions of defeat yet to happen. The closer they came to the summit, the heavier the Force weighed on them. Anakin's visions were more intense, clearer. He saw Obi-Wan falling, planets burning, and a masked figure standing where he once had. The decision weighed on both of them, but differently. War would soon touch even their quiet world, and the two Jedi carried more than just a report back to Coruscant. They carried the burden of vision of choices that would soon redefine not just them, but the galaxy itself. For Obi-Wan, it was an act of hope that Anakin could still walk the Jedi path. For Anakin, it was a moment of fracture, the first real secret he kept from the Order, not out of strategy, but belief. The Force was strong here, but it shimmered strangely neither. Light nor dark, but both. Locals, known as the Veilari, were Force-sensitive, but not Jedi, one he would fight alone. They practiced balance in its truest sense and greeted the Jedi with warmth tempered by caution. They feared that the galaxy-esque conflict would corrupt Thalara as it had every other place touched by war, though reluctant to disturb a world sacred to Jedi history. The threat of dark knowledge falling into separatist hands left no choice. They arrived at dawn, the world draped in golden mist and ancient forests untouched by war. As they climbed the mountain toward the signal's origin, the path tested more than their endurance. For the first time, he spoke his fear aloud. What if the Jedi were wrong? What if balance required ending everything they clung to? Obi-Wan didn't argue. He simply stood beside him and said, "Then we'll face it together, as we always have." At the summit, they found the Sorcen ancient shrine containing a fragmented holocron of both Jedi and Sith design. It pulsed with memory and prophecy. When Anakin touched it, the relic flared to life, revealing glimpses of futures he could barely comprehend. Temples fallen, and one truth echoed through it all. He stood at the center. The chosen one, yes, but not in the way he was taught. Balance would not come through. Peace it would come through destruction and rebirth. Obi-Wan urged him to step back, to let the council decide. But Anakin hesitated, torn between duty and destiny. In the end, they sealed the shrine beneath stone in time, choosing not to bring it to the council. As they left Thalara behind, the Valari watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. And though the Clone Wars still raged across stars and systems, Anakin Skywalker had already begun another war one no blade could solve, and no master could guide him through. The war's momentum churned endlessly, dragging systems and souls into its undertow. Anakin and Obi-Wan were summoned to Felucia once more, where pockets of resistance threatened a tenuous Republic hold. Blaster marks carved into trees, saber burns in midair, and soldiers' gear left untouched as if they vanished mid-step. The jungle felt haunted. Obi-Wan's intuition screamed caution. Anakin pressed forward, eyes narrowed, heart racing. Each step pulled him deeper into the unknown and farther from the man he once was. The terrain was wild titanic fungi, bioluminescent swamps, and a thick mist that veiled friend from foe. The incident was dismissed as another casualty of war-induced madness, and the mission was marked as complete. But Obi-Wan knew better. So did Anakin. There they encountered a lone warrior masked, robed in tattered cloth, and wielding dual sabers of unstable crimson. Not the peace of understanding, but the pause before something breaks. Outside, the Clone Wars raged on. Inside, a story shifted. He introduced himself only as Maquis, a former Jedi who had disappeared early in the war. Maquis claimed to have seen visions of the Republic's fall, the Order's betrayal, and a fire that would consume them all. He had abandoned the Jedi not for power, but for clarity. Clone troopers had gone missing during reconnaissance, and whispers of an unknown presence filled calms with static and fear. He challenged Obi-Wan's faith and accused Anakin of already walking the path of destruction. The jungle's silence, the visions from Thalara, and now this threads pulling tighter around a truth he could not yet name. He felt watched, not by an enemy, but by destiny itself. Anakin, seething, struck without restraint, forcing Maquis to yield after a prolonged duel. But the warrior did not resist capture. Instead, he knelt and said softly, "You'll understand soon, you especially." What began as a recovery mission shifted swiftly into something stranger. The Jedi discovered signs of battle without enemies. Eventually, they traced the disturbance to an ancient grove, where Force energy spiraled unnaturally. The confrontation that followed was fierce but almost meditative. Machias fought like wind fluid, defensive, relentless only in purpose. Later, aboard their cruiser, Obi-Wan pondered Machias's words, while Anakin remained restless, pacing near the observation window. The Jedi Council interrogated Machias, but he revealed nothing further, only smiled when asked about Anakin. As the cruiser drifted into hyperspace, stars stretching endlessly ahead, a rare silence fell between Master and Knight, and in the distance shadow moved slow, certain, inevitable. A ripple in the Force brought Anakin and Obi-Wan to the skies above Kamino. The cloning facility's heart of the Republic's war machine had gone dark. Lightning crackled without pause, and the ocean below churned as if something deeper stirred. Security footage revealed them being herded into the ocean-facing vaults by a masked figure wielding twin red sabers, fluid and calculating. They would later learn. Tyros awaited them at the heart of a reactor room, suffused with flickering plasma conduits and the thrum of unspoken power. There were no words. The duel erupted like a storm within the storm. Clone troopers assisted in evacuation, while Anakin led a desperate bid to stabilize the reactors. In the chaos, Anakin stood on the edge of the platform, soaked in seawater and silence. Obi-Wan approached, concern etched across his features. Yoda believed he was a herald of a storm long foretold. But only Anakin felt the pull of what lay beneath, for in Darth Tyros's voice, he heard his own doubts reflected uncomfortable truths cloaked in opposition, but said nothing. What words could reach a man already drifting from the shore? He entered the neural chamber where developing clones were suspended. There he saw them. Thousands of blank faces, all identical, all destined for war. In their silence, he saw himself. Anakin clashed with Tyros in vicious flurries, his blade dancing with raw emotion. Obi-Wan moved with grace and discipline, searching for weaknesses in the storm. A shadow in the Sith's growing storm, unknown to the Council but known to Anakin in ways he couldn't explain. Kamino lived. But the future had shifted again. Though the Jedi still saw stars and systems, Anakin was beginning to see shapes behind them, shapes that watched and waited and whispered only to him. He whispered prophecy and poison, naming Anakin the unshaped blade, forged for something greater than servitude to an order that feared change. He taunted Obi-Wan with failure, with the impossibility of guiding a soul too immense, too destined to be contained. Their blades ignited sparks, not only in metal, but in thought. The encounter to come would not be their first only, the first in the open. Their gunship met resistance before even touching the landing platform. Stealth droids, not separatists made but of unknown origin, sleek, silent, and cloaked in dark alloy, they fought not to win but to delay. That worried Obi-Wan more than any number of blasters. Communications ceased. Sensor readings flickered with anomalies, and whispers spread of unknown ships breaching the orbital perimeter. The Jedi were dispatched not only as generals, but as guardians of the galaxy's most fragile cornerstone. The army bred for a war no longer clean or clear. Upon arrival, the storm howled with unnatural rage. Inside the cloning labs, halls were dim and flooded, signs of internal sabotage. Clones stood at alert, confused but loyal. Kaminoans were missing. As they reached the main facility chamber, the air shifted. Tyros fought not to kill, but to provoke. An explosion rocked the chamber. Tyros vanished into shadow, fleeing through the collapse. The facility began to sink. They saved the structure barely. But something had been lost that day. A sense of control, perhaps. The Council convened. Some urged that Tyros was a new threat. Ocean calmed. The stars shifted again, and this time they led Anakin and Obi-Wan to the wild expanse of Jakara's. A frontier world choked in perpetual dusk, where the war moved like myth more than strategy. Rumors told of a Jedi outpost rediscovered long abandoned before the Clone Wars, untouched by both Republic and Separatists. But what intrigued the Council was the beacon it had begun transmitting. Not a distress call, but an invitation. In the language of the first Jedi, the two Jedi landed amid twisted canyons and shimmering stone arches. Following the pulse of the signal through sand-choked passages, the outpost lay buried beneath a ridge of obsidian, its entrance unlocked not by technology, but by presence in the Force. Inside, they found preserved text scrolls and holocrons sealed in time, untouched by flame or decay. Anakin walked with a purposeful gait, no longer questioning destiny but entertaining it. A mirror not to who they were, but to what they might yet become. Obi-Wan felt the shift, and for the first time, he feared he was no longer walking beside his brother, and the galaxy was already beginning to feel the heat of that revelation. But following a step behind into a darkness lit only by trust, a meditation sphere, ancient in its patterning, where time slowed. They entered it together, but emerged apart in experience. Obi-Wan saw flashes of the High Republic, of guardians who watched and served but never ruled. He saw peace built slowly, patiently. Anakin saw flame, saw empires crumbling, sabers drawn between shadows, and himself not fallen but risen through fire, not lost but reborn. The architecture whispered of Bogan and Ashla, the old names for dark and light. Not as enemies, but as aspects in balance. As they explored, the outpost responded to Anakin. Lights flared at his approach. Doors slid open. One chamber lit with images from his own past moments no one else could have recorded. Visions of his mother, of Tatooine skies, of smiling through sunlight. Obi-Wan watched warily, troubled not by the place, but by its choice of resonance. The Force here was not guiding it, was observing. Deep within, they discovered a chamber, unlike the others. When the trance broke, neither spoke of what they saw. The silence hung thick as they prepared to leave. But something had awakened within Anakin, and the outpost no longer felt neutral. Felt like an answer waiting to be given shape. Tool forged without allegiance, waiting only for the one bold enough to wield it. As they departed, the beacon ceased. The outpost returned to stillness, no longer revealing its path. The war would move on, systems gained, systems lost. But Jakara's had offered something neither Republic nor Separatists ever could. A glimpse of truth, unburdened by allegiance. And in that reflection, Anakin's eyes burned not with doubt but with resolve. The war hadn't changed him, it had revealed him. The galactic front line shuddered again, and this time, where shadowed towers blocked the sun, and forgotten industrial zones housed thinkers and traders alike, their target. A slicer known only as Cessair, a former Republic codebreaker now operating beneath the radar, feeding both sides with surgical precision. The Council hoped to recover or silence her quietly. She merely said the galaxy deserved to choose whom it followed, not be told. She handed over the data willingly. Anakin watched as the Council debated ethics in place of accountability. There's not one mention of the pain in those transmissions. There's not one whisper of apology to the forgotten. Obi-Wan offered only a quiet thank you and a clasp on the shoulder. It was meant as reassurance, but it landed like stone, knowing it wouldn't be released. The order wouldn't allow it. Obi-Wan left in silence, his face tight. Anakin lingered, asking her why she hadn't run. The Jedi Temple still gleamed, ivory tower atop a world of shadows. But Anakin had stood in both light and dark, and he was no longer sure which side still held the truth. "You don't run from what you are," she said, "even if the world insists you're something else, suspected something in the city's distant breath." He stood on a catwalk, overlooking the endless drop of Coruscant's lower levels, thinking of the truths we bury and the myths we uphold. Deeper that this mission had less to do with archives and more to do with monitoring him, the call came from within. Coruscant itself, the heart of the Republic, stood on the precipice of unease, now reconfigured into a command center bristling with stolen data. But she was expecting them. Cessair was no warrior. She fought with words and truths. She welcomed them into her lair with a calm only conviction could grant. Then she showed them. Whispers of unrest in the underworld districts had swelled into a low roar, not of rebellion, but of revelation. A data leak from deep within the archives threatened to expose inconsistencies in Jedi intervention across key battles. Propaganda or truth, none could say. But it had implications for the war, for faith in the Order, and most delicately for Anakin Skywalker. The Jedi Council summoned Obi-Wan and Anakin not to battle, but to investigate a lead traced to the Works sector, disguised in civilian garb. The two Jedi descended into the Undercity, blending with the murmurs of refugees, smugglers, and lost causes. Anakin moved with discomfort. This world reminded him of the streets of Tatooine, of powerlessness. Obi-Wan, ever composed, walked as one familiar with guilt. In these streets, the war was a myth. Only hunger and survival remained. They tracked Cessair to an abandoned transport control hub, records of battles repurposed. Jedi decisions rewritten to fit Republic narratives. Operations that conveniently vanished from Senate review. But what froze, Anakin, were the audio files and cut field transmissions where he could hear himself, unedited, unfiltered, his rage, his choices. Moments when the line between Jedi and Destroyer blurred, Cessair made no demands. Back in the temple, the data was sealed. That night, Anakin returned alone to the Works. Cessair was gone, only silence remained and far above.